Hi there, it's Mrs. Nelson, and we're going to talk a little bit today about how breathing is controlled. So this is kind of an important thing because breathing is under partial conscious control. So we can choose to hold our breath, but we could never hold our breath until we died. So if you're, when you were little, if you had a fit and stomped your feet and said to your parents, I'm going to hold my breath until I die, that's not going to happen. And by the end of this lesson, you're going to know why. So the rhythm of your breathing is controlled by the respiratory center, and this is in the medulla oblongata in the brain. So your brain's a really interesting organ, and we'll talk a little bit more about it when we talk about the nervous system, but your brain evolved from the inside out. So right at the base of your skull, kind of at the back, where your spinal cord would attach to your brain, that's where the medulla oblongata is. So that's controls kind of your life function. So it's going to come up again and again and again. So we talked about it a little bit when we talked about heart rate. Your heart has its own pacemaker. It can control the beat sent by sending an electrical signal, but how fast or slow that is under the control of the medulla oblongata as well. So again, just at the base of your brainstem, and this kind of controls your life function. So this would explain why lots of primitive animals or animals that don't have kind of the same ability to have conscious thought that we do have those life function parts, heart rate, breathing, that sort of thing. So the respiratory center sends out impulses through our nerves to the diaphragm and the muscles of the rib cage, causing inspiration to occur. So chemical input can also affect the rate and the depth of your breathing. So whether you breathe kind of fast and shallow or you take long, slow, deep breaths. So your respiratory centers is sensitive to how much carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions, so H plus is hydrogen ions, are in the blood. So when we're breathing, our body doesn't really care how much oxygen we have in the blood, but it cares how much carbon dioxide we have in the blood. So you have something called a chemoreceptor, and that's in the arteries, and that detects how much carbon dioxide and those hydrogen ions are in the blood. Hydrogen ions will make your blood acidic, so we don't want too many of those. And it sends signals to the medulla oblongata. So the respiratory center is not affected by low oxygen levels. Okay. So due to nervous stimulation, the diaphragm contracts. So remember, when the diaphragm contracts, it flattens out and lowers. So when it's, I'll just get my pen here. When your diaphragm is relaxed, it's this concave or dome shaped. So that's, oh goodness, I've lost my stylus and one is broken. But when it contracts, your diaphragm will pull down and flatten out. And so your diaphragm will contract, it'll lower down while your rib cages move, your ribs move up and kind of out. And that creates a large space in our chest cavity and a low pressure, and that causes inspiration. So air flows into the alveoli. Those are the tiny little air sacs in your lungs where the walls expand and stretch. Receptors in the alveoli detect this stretching and send a signal through the nerves to the respiration center to stop that medulla oblongata from sending those messages for the diaphragm to contract. Diaphragm relaxes, so it moves upward back to that original dome shape, and the rib cage also relaxes, so it moves down and inward. And then the chest cavity space is smaller. It makes, as the space gets smaller, it puts high pressure on those molecules, and they rush out, and air is forced out of the lungs. So breathing is regulated by the carbon dioxide levels in the blood. So it's better not to give pure oxygen to help someone breathe. It should be a mix of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So if you've ever seen on TV, or maybe you yourself have had trouble catching your breath and kind of hyperventilated, they'll often give you a paper bag to breathe in. So if you think about, if we regulate by amount of carbon dioxide in our blood, why do we give that paper bag? As you're breathing in and out through that paper bag, you're breathing in that recycled air, and that recycled air is high in carbon dioxide. So you're trying to kind of trick your body into having your brain take back over that breathing, because whatever is causing you to hyperventilate, whether it's anxiety or you got scared or whatever it might be, we're trying to trick our body back into taking over that control. So the question at the bottom is, can we control our breathing, and why is that important? And so yes, we obviously can hold our breath for short periods of time. So what we say is our breathing is under partial conscious control. So we have the ability to hold our breath, and that could be important if we fall in the water, or we're in somewhere where there's a toxic chemical in the air. But most of the time, we don't have to think about breathing, and that's also really important. Can you imagine if every few seconds you had to go, remember to breathe, remember to breathe? You'd never get kind of anything done. So those are kind of the two key things about today's lesson. We regulate the amount of we monitor the amount of carbon dioxide, and that controls our breathing rate, and that breathing centers the medulla oblongata, and our breathing rate is under partial conscious control. We can hold our breath if we had to. Most of the time we don't have to think about breathing, but if we try to hold our breath too long, eventually we'll pass out, and then that's good for our bodies because it just takes, once you're passed out, you can't cover your nose and your mouth, and your body just takes back over. That medulla oblongata would just take back over and monitor your breathing rate. Lung capacity. So tidal volume is the average amount of air humans breathe in when relaxed. So this is about 500 milliliters, or half a liter per breath. So that's usually if you're just breathing regular, you're not exercising, you're just sitting around on quarantine maybe, you're breathing in about half a liter of air per breath. So that's called your tidal volume. Your vital capacity is the maximum amount of air which can be breathed in during one breath. And that averages about 6,000 milliliters, or 6 liters. And that changes for some people. I'm usually more around kind of 5,000 or 5,300 milliliters. But after you breathe in, and out and exhale the maximum amount of air, some air is left in the lungs, and that's called the expiratory reserve, or reserve volume, or reserve air, and that remains in the lungs after you've expired or exhaled, and that's about 1,000 liters, milliliters, or 1 liter. If we were in class, I have a device called a spirometer. You're able to take a deep breath in and breathe out as hard as you can, and you're able to measure that vital capacity. Another way you can do this is by using a balloon if you'd like. So I'm looking at, we usually do a lung capacity lab. I'm looking at a couple of virtual labs. I'll also give you an opportunity to test your lung capacity using a balloon. I hope that's helpful for today, and take care.